What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be ranking every single Nissan Z car to ever exist. Now for today's video, we're not going to be looking at generations specifically. There's going to be multiple cars from, the same generation in this video, and just to name out chronologically every single Z car that we're looking at, we're going to be looking at the 240, 260, 280, 300ZX, Z31, the Z32 300ZX, the 350Z, the 370Z, and the new Nissan Z. Just, I guess, regular Nissan Z, or the 7th generation, whatever you want to call it. For this video, I'm going to be also grouping the 280ZX, or the 2nd generation of the Z, with the 280, so they're going to have, like, the same ranking just because they're so similar in my own opinion. And also, I'm not going to be looking at any special editions or like limited editions of the Zs. I'm not going to be looking at the original Datsuns from like the 1950s that are technically predecessors to the Zs, and I'm not going to be looking at concept cars like the 1999 240Z concept. So now, before getting into today's list, definitely be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're new down below. Also, if you've already been subscribed, click that little bell icon to actually turn on post notifications. That helps you get notified every time that I do post new content. And as a smaller car channel here on YouTube that posts new content daily, it definitely helps me out a ton. But without wasting any more time, getting into the first spot, or the bottom spot, at number 8, we have the 350Z. Now, I know what you're thinking, the 350Z or Z33 at the very bottom of the list. I think that, oh, that's might be a little bit harsh or whatever. Honestly, the only reason I have it this low is because it introduced the bubbly styling and like round silhouette that we see with the 350 and the 370Zs. It kind of goes away from that traditional Z car shape. I don't particularly hate the 350Z. I still think it is a pretty good car, and now in 2022 it could make for a fantastic like little project car. They are relatively cheap nowadays, and I believe like the performance or enthusiast packages come with an LSD, so that's pretty cool from factory. But the introduction of the terribly sounding VQ engines with its 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6, making 300 horsepower and 260 foot-pounds of torque. And by the way, that is actually the numbers from the power increase that we saw in 2005, but it just wasn't like that much. It's not enough to cut it, at least in my book. Also, when you take into account the curb weight of the 350Zs, they range from 3,188 pounds all the way up to just over 3,600 pounds. So considering that like all the other Zs on this list and all the other Zs like historically have been so light, that's a pretty like hefty Z car, and it's honestly really fat for a Z. In addition to that, the 5th generation of the Z was only offered with one 6-speed automatic and one 5-speed manual transmission option for the entire generation, ranging from 2002 all the way up to 2009. And again, at least it did have some variety with the multiple special editions that we saw during that time and packages offered with the cars. But still, at the end of the day, it kind of just like lacked variety, and it wasn't too impressive. Now, coming in at number 7 on this list, we have the Z31 300ZX, or the 3rd generation. Let me start off by saying that this car is so ugly. I absolutely hate the design and the front end. I do, however, love the Z32s, and you might be surprised where I have the Z32s placed on this list when we get to like the latter part of the video. But it still did, like, there was some nice things about the Z31. It still did introduce the VG series of V6s that were used in the Z31s and Z32s. It ran from 83 to 89. Also, a little fun fact about the Z31, this generation was the only generation to actually have a production Z to actually ever feature an RB engine in it with the 200ZR, and that actually has the RB20DET inline 6 single turbo engine, which is kind of funny because, at least for me, whenever I think of RB engines, when most people think of RB engines, they think of Nissan Skylines. I never really think of them being in a Z. but that is pretty cool. Also, it offered a little bit of variety with transmission options in this generation, offering 3 different manual transmission options and just one 4-speed auto trans option. Now, coming in at number 6, we have the 260Z. This is the lowest ranking Z from the first generation, and it was essentially kind of like the middle child. It doesn't really get a lot of love, and it's not really going to get a lot of love in this list. It came around in the mid-70s. It has a 2.6 liter L26 inline 6 naturally aspirated engine, like its name would suggest. It makes 162 horsepower and 157 foot-pounds of torque, which was a little bump from the 240Zs, but it is also a little bit more heavier, weighing in right around 2,400 pounds. It had a 3-speed auto trans option, a 4-speed manual trans option, as well as a 5-speed manual transmission option. In addition to that, there was a little bit of differences when it came to the design between the 240 and 260, but really not that much, and honestly most people can only tell the two apart by looking at the badges. Now, speaking about the 240Z, that is in the number 5 spot today, and I only ranked it above the 260 simply because it's kind of like the first Z that America ever saw, and it is also the first Z if you're not counting the original Fairlady Z or the Datsun predecessors of the 1950s. It actually did start sales in October of 1969, and it was kind of like a Japanese pony car or sporty car. At least its introduction did help kind of fuel the pony car phrase that was going on in America during the 1960s, obviously with the introduction of the Mustang and Camaros. Now, like its name would suggest, it does have a 2.4 liter L24 inline 6, very simple engine, cast iron block, 2 valves per cylinder. It had a red line around 7,000 RPMs. It also had this same 3-speed auto, 4-speed manual, and 5-speed manual found in the 260s, and its curb weight was just 2,302 pounds, which, to like kind of compare it to something, that's only a tad heavier than an NA Miata. So these Zs were extremely light, and with its 151 horsepower and 146 foot-pounds of torque, with an independent front and rear suspension and front disc brakes, that made for a phenomenal driving experience back in the 60s or the late 60s when these guys were actually introduced to the market. Now, coming in at number 4, we have the 370Z, or the Z34, or 6th generation, whatever you want to call it. Now, the main thing holding it back is, again, that like bubbly silhouette design that we saw being introduced with the 370Zs. It had an incredibly long run, and there are plenty of reasons for that. It's not just Nissan's incapability of creating a new Z car. It was basically around since 2009, and I think it ended production in either 2020 or 2021. I'm not entirely sure, but it's powered by a 3.7 liter V6 engine, the VQ37VHR. The power output from this generation ranges from 328 to 350 horsepower for the Nismo options, with peak torque varying between 268 to 275 foot-pounds of torque. The 370Z also had an official 0 to 60 of 5.1. However, Motor Trend actually did their own 0 to 60 testing with this 370Z, and they were able to squeeze out a 4.7 second time. It also was the fastest production Z out of the time, with a top quarter mile time of, I believe, the Nismo variant being 13.1 seconds. Now, despite all that, it did lack a little bit of variety when it came to customization options as well as transmission options. There was only one 5-speed manual option and one 6-speed automatic transmission option for this generation, but besides that, the 370 was a fantastic car, and again, it would be higher up on this list if not for that kind of bubbly 2000s design. I just hate that design. Now, coming in at number 3, we have the new 2023 Nissan Z, or the 7th generation of the Z. Now, what else can I say about this new Z that I haven't said already? If you've been subscribed to my channel for any amount of time, you know that I'm a huge fanboy when it comes to this new Z. I absolutely love the return to the traditional Z silhouette that Nissan went ahead and took, as well as the drivetrain. You know, the 3-liter twin turbocharged V6 engine producing a 400 horsepower with a manual transmission option and that LSD coming in the Performance Zs. It's a fantastic car. Obviously, it hasn't really had time to prove itself. Maybe I'm just putting it this high on the list and in the top 3 because of like recency bias. I don't know. Let me know if I'm incorrect down in the comments below. But I cannot wait to see what this 7th generation has in store for us as the years go on. Hopefully it doesn't, you know, last a whole decade like the 370 and the 350s did. But I definitely think that this new Z is truly a turning point in the trajectory of Nissan just as a whole and as a company. They're really starting to listen to their customers, and to be honest, a couple people like had, you know, issues with the design when it was initially like released back in like 2020 as like a prototype, but I saw it in person at the 2022 New York Auto Show, and it's just beautiful, and it looks even better in person. Like, it's just phenomenal. They did kind of mess around with the proportions when you compare it to like the original Zs, but besides that, I just absolutely love this new Z, and hopefully I can get my hands on one in the future to do an actual like dedicated review on it. Now moving up to the second spot on this list, at number 2 we got the Z32 300ZX, or the 4th generation. Now what did I say before? You might be surprised at where I put the Z32. It's pretty high up on this list, and yes, I might be showing my bias for Japanese 90s sports cars, but the only thing really unchanged from the previous generation's 300ZX was that 3-liter V6 engine, now with dual overhead camshafts and variable valve timing, which made increased 222 horsepower and 198 foot-pounds of torque, naturally aspirated. Now the turbo variant, which was actually, you know, 2 Garrett turbochargers, it was a twin turbocharged setup, that actually made 300 horsepower with 283 foot-pounds of torque, and it was incredibly tunable. Also, the design, night and day compared to the Z31. The Z31, again, that front end looks like there's something wrong with it. The Z32 just looks right. It doesn't have like pop-up headlights like most 90s cars do, but it's so awesome. And to see one in person, again, it's one of those cars that just like looks better in person. Let me know if I have this ranked way too high. It's understandable if some people think that this should be more towards like the mid-tier when it comes to Z cars, but it's one of my favorite Zs out there, and its 0 to 60 time ranged from between like 5 to 6 seconds, and it had a governed top speed of 155 miles per hour, which at the time made it the I think highest top speed of any production Z car ever. Now finally, coming in at number 1, you guys probably know what I'm going to say already, we got the 280Z. The 280Z was initially released in 1975 for North America only, and it featured another engine displacement increase up to 2.8 liters. Obviously following the trend from, you know, the 240 and the 260Z, except this 280 had fuel injection, which replaced the carburetors that we saw on the 240 and the 260Zs. And that allowed this new 280Z to increase power up to 170 horsepower, and I truly believe that this 280 had the coolest design of all of the first generation Nissan Zs. As a matter of fact, it even had its own generation with the 2nd gen, or 280ZX. Now, yes, I'm not talking about the 280ZX really in this video, but I did say I'm going to group these together, and the 280ZX, or 2nd generation of the Z, was an extremely popular Z that offered even better levels of performance and comfort than what was found in those first generation models. Now, that's pretty much just going to be it for today's video. Let me know where I went, you know, right, where I was wrong, and how you would rank, you know, the Z cars differently. Again, I didn't do this video necessarily based on generation. I know some cars kind of filled in, like the 350 and the 370, they have their own generations technically, but I basically went through each and every Z car nameplate and I ranked them according to my own opinion. While you're down in the comment section letting me know if I messed up or not, definitely be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you're new, and be sure to turn on post notifications if you're already subscribed. Again, it really does help me out a ton as a smaller YouTuber. But that's pretty much just going to be it for me today. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed today's video, click on either of these links right here to watch a similar video from this channel, or click on the little circle link right there to actually subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. I do appreciate all the support, but thank you for sticking to the end of this video, and I hope you have a fantastic day.